Welcome to Ember Igniters, the podcast that sets your soul ablaze. I'm Fran Malfer, here with Jenna Wilmers, and we're your Ember Igniters. So have you ever had someone just come up to you and say, "Hey, what's wrong with you?"
Oh my goodness, so many times.
I mean, you're thinking to yourself, everything is going really well. What do you mean by that?
Well, a lot of the time I'm just in like deep thought. Like my wheels get turning or I've got like a good idea or I'm mulling something over sometimes.
And you know what I do when I'm mulling over? I do this face, where I'm kind of like in such deep thought, and that can scare people.
It kind of does, which is weird.
It is. And so they get a mispresentation of really who I am. And I'm sure a lot of you out there have had this same kind of thing. So we kind of want to talk about that a little bit more today. So one of the responses that usually comes in the form of something like, I'm fine. What are you talking about? I would say that to people and they would say, really?
And they wonder why and then they kind of look at you like, because sometimes when you say I'm fine, it comes off as like, I'm fine. What are you talking about? And it's like, well, see right there. I just told you, like, there's something wrong with you. And you're like, no. And it's almost like, well, there wasn't something wrong with me, but there is now.
Oh, I have felt like that so many times. Like, if you want me to feel that way, I will.
Yes.
But you're just kind of putting like when you think about how they use fire blankets, like you're deep into something that's really you're passionate about. And then they come and they throw this blanket on the fire of your passion because they're misunderstanding.
Yes, 100%.
But I think to myself, what am I doing then? Really, what is the persona that I'm giving off? But the truth is, it's because we communicate so much with our body language.
Yes, it's so true. Have you ever been accused of having an RBF? A resting bothered face? Because I have.
I think that definitely in my lifetime I've experienced that. Didn't know exactly what to call it.
Yeah.
But what they gave off in return, talking about body language, right?
Yes.
We're always using our body language. But what they gave off in return with that question also put me I was ill at ease, thinking,
right.
Because for such a long time, I really wanted to please people. I wanted to be able to communicate well with them. But then when you feel like you're communicating and people are misunderstanding you, you don't know where to go with that.
You really don't. And you kind of feel caught off guard of like, because it's left field, right? It comes out of left field and then you kind of start tripping over your words, and then they totally take it to another level by kind of double dosing you when they're like, see, I was right. You're frustrated. And it's like, no.
The other thing I really had to work on was the fact that when something like that happened, I felt like I had to justify myself or explain myself, like, no, that's not what I meant. And I went into this whole sort of internal, like, let me explain. But I wonder if it's more that we have to recognize that people have different body postures and different ways in which they think and process. Like I said, I can get pretty like my faces. You've probably noticed on some of these podcasts, actually, all of a sudden my face will go in some direction or my eyes will widen out because I'm thinking about something and I just can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah.
Those are all exciting things that people understand. But when you have a quiet face and you're intently working on something that is so important and you're quiet, especially if people are used to you being a little bit more outgoing, the first thing they're going to say is, do you have a problem? Is something wrong?
Why do we always have to over-explain ourselves to people? What I really want to know, like, why is it that when something happens and we go on the defense, explaining is the first thing we jump to?
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's none of their business. I mean, really.
Yeah.
Like, what I'm thinking about might not be any of their business. And so, you might just go, oh, well, I'm thinking about this and this and this, and no, I'm fine. And it's like, well, okay, that's great. But now I just explained everything when I don't owe that to you.
No. And you know what I think sometimes is that because that has happened often to both Jenna and I, we've talked about this in our life story, is what happens is that if they had just rephrased the question,
Yes.
if they had just say, you look really like something might be going on. Can you tell me about it? That's a whole different way than what's wrong, because that's an assumption. They're making an assumption that something is wrong. Now, what I've learned is that because that's happened to me, I don't ever want to say that to somebody else.
Yeah.
So there's this, what do we call that? Sort of this ability to say, don't make the assumption because someone's face or body language is giving something off that that's exactly what they are. So we get misunderstood a lot.
Is that my phone? No, it went through the computer.
Well, in case you heard that ding, we're just dealing with technical issues, but we love our topic.
Right.
I mean, we have to laugh about it.
We do. So remember a couple weeks ago when we were, at the conference table having a meeting, and
Yes.
you had said something to me, and I just kind of looked at you, and I was like, okay, and in that time, just trying to allow you to say what you needed to say.
That's right.
And not necessarily end the conversation if she had something more to say, but really just give her the space to say what she needed to say. And then I found out the next day that you were expecting a response, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what do I say to that? I don't know.
Right. That's an interesting component of when you can have an RBF, kind of moment where people are like, wow, stay away from so-and-so. Have you ever been, if you're in a working environment, you have a lot of people around, you want to go ask someone a question, you go, and then, or someone else has just been in that office and they come out and they're like, oh, be careful, watch out, because they're not in a good mood. We do a lot of assuming what we think people are saying. Now, I'm going to tell you that in that same conversation that she just shared, I'm over there looking for what she said, a response. So now I'm thinking, she doesn't understand what I'm saying. I'm not communicating properly. And all of a sudden, I get into this, we kind of have to laugh about it, but I get into this, let me re-explain over and over again, that defensiveness.
And I'm over here going, okay, we already went through this loop and now we're going again. And I'm like, well, maybe she's going to say something different that I missed the first time.
Well, see, this is why we're talking about this, because it happens between us. And we have many, many moments when we are so in sync that we're almost finishing each other's sentences. And then we have these days where it's like whatever is coming at us or whatever is processing, and I'm trying to explain or she's trying to say something, and it just doesn't come across. And then we do those, we make faces, really, in a sense. We do. So one thing I want to say about that is that even when you're not speaking, you're communicating. And that's one of the things that we are really adamant about, is that we find an authentic way to present our emotions and our feelings so that people don't have to misunderstand. But it is a two-way street, don't you think?
Yes, I think totally with being the misunderstood, but also in those moments, one of the things that we really had to become vigilant on and really take grasp of is remembering to pray right there in the moment.
How true.
We sometimes when we get on these rolls, we keep trying to re-explain and retry and we're looking at each other perplexed, like, okay, I tried it a different way and you're still not getting it. Okay, well, how else could I reframe it? But every time, as soon as we pray and say, okay, Lord, we need help, he delivers. And it's so hard to just always remember that. And the reason it's hard is because that's the enemy knows that he thinks he can come in and stir things up, but we're going to overcome. And so he knows that's a pain point. So he's going to continue to target that. And so we just want to encourage you to be vigilant about that.
And you know, when she says pray, we're not saying like stop in the middle of what you're doing and, you know, fold your hands and close your eyes and say something. It's the internal conversation. And that's really what prayer is, that internal conversation that you can have. Like you're sitting there and you're thinking, oh my goodness. So you just in your mind say, Lord, help me here for a moment. Mm-hmm. And so it's really not a huge thing. Or for some of you that maybe prayer is not the way you would go, you might want to say to yourself, just slow down, take the time to listen. I had to learn in my life, and I'm not good at it yet, so just so you know, there's hope for everybody, is that you have to listen almost more than you speak.
That's a great point. Listening more than you speak is probably one of the most valuable lessons anybody could learn.
And when you do that, I think if you take that time, you know, call it a pause, call it a prayer that you send up, or whatever you want to call it, it helps to settle your emotions in just that moment to say, what am I missing here? You know, and when you ask yourself that question, or you ask God that question, you're able to free your mind of the cobwebs of like, I don't get what she's saying, or is she thinking I'm doing it wrong? You know, I've done that. It's like you start to pile it on yourself even, you know, thinking, oh, it's just me. It's always going to be me. Well, that's not really true.
But even on that hamster wheel where you're saying like, it's just me, you almost become so focused on that.
Yeah.
That really anything else that comes to you doesn't even make it in because you aren't receiving it.
Yeah.
And I remember being younger in my Christian journey, really, and people would say, oh, well, you're just not ready to receive it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I heard what you said. Like, I mean, that's receiving it, right? I heard you. And really, no, like, but did you really hear them?
I really like that you said that, because what's the first thing people say when they feel that they're misunderstood? I've said it. I'm just going to be honest. I'll say, you didn't hear me.
No.
You know,
I've said that too. Yeah.
My husband is passed, but when we were together and we were younger, these words came out of our mouths like, no, you are not hearing me. Mm-hmm. So what that does what it did to me is it made me go, okay, I'm not saying it right, which puts us right back on that wheel of thinking if we just talk more. Yeah. Instead of saying to the person, we learned how to do this later in life when I'd say, okay, can you try that again and explain it to me in a different way? You know, like, and literally you could see the wheels turning in his head thinking, okay, how can I say this different? And eventually, if he said it a little different, I would go, oh, that's what you meant. Mm-hmm. You know, so it takes, like she said, vigilance to keep in the communication loop, because you could just walk away.
You could, but that's not the answer. Right?
No, it's not.
So you may have encountered this situation too. So where other people might, they've told me so many times when I feel very strongly about something and we'll be in the conversation. Yeah. I mean, you can even kind of hear it a little bit today between the two of us. When you feel strongly, you kind of go at that conversation or even at people with your words a little stronger. And so they're just kind of like, they get this whole thing of your persona and they're like, whoa, like you're so hyped up, chill out, you know, or like, as they say now, chill out, bro. Yeah. You know, these days. And it's like, no,
and you're thinking, I'm chilled. I'm completely chilled.
Yes, I'm totally chilled. What are you talking about? Exactly. It's so like funny. And it's like, I'm totally fine. And then they're like, well, see, now you're mad. And it's like, no. And it's like, I'm just passionate.
And that's really what, you know, why we're talking about it this way is because as we've been telling you that everything is possible for you, you can achieve the dreams that you want, you can, you know, get there. There are going to be times when you're going to face this very thing where people are like, you know, thinking you're kind of out of your mind if you think that can happen, or they're going to interpret your intensity and your passion just like Jenna was sharing, you know, and they're going to think, wow, she's kind of crazed, or I don't understand why they're pushing so hard. But that's what passion really does for us. And we see that all around us, really, when you look at people who have started to take a new trajectory in their life. They figured out what is that purpose in their life, and suddenly they're like on fire, and they're ready to go. And then it feels bad when people come back to them and don't see that in them. And that can deflate, or it could really sort of bring that passionate flame to what we call embers. Like the fire just sort of went out of you. And so we don't want that to happen to anybody as you're moving in your journey. It's so important for you to recognize that listening, but also rephrasing. Sometimes just rephrasing a question can make all the difference in the world.
It can. I remember going through those days when people would say that to me of like, hey, just chill out. I was really labeled a lot of labels that really did deflate me and really, diminish me to embers. I mean, I was called intense, intimidating. The one that really got me the most was domineering and controlling. And I'm like, controlling? That kind of wrecked me when I first heard that. Partly because like controlling the situation was never my intention in anything. And actually, I mean, Fran can attest to this. Like, I don't try to control anything. If anything, I'm really trying to help others do things and work together and collaborate. So when I heard those words, I knew it wasn't me. I knew it wasn't in my heart that way. But to be perceived that way, it's almost like you then become paralyzed again, because you're like, well, how do I change somebody's perception? Well, that's the hardest thing to do, because you make your first impression in the first 7 seconds.
Isn't that something?
And once you've made a bad impression, there ain't no going back.
Right. So basically what I think we're also trying to tell you is you can look around in the people who are successful today. I don't follow tennis per se, but I know who Serena Williams is. And if you've ever looked into her background and so forth, she had a father who was really passionate about his girls becoming tennis stars, and he kind of pushed them hard. But when she's on the court, and she's hitting that ball, don't you just feel the immense pressure of what she's trying to get that ball in the right spot, do that right thing? And people are cheering her on for that. So I want you to know that even when, because of all the things you said about controlling or intimidating, or they're labels that people will put on you. And especially when you're in a brand new passionate trajectory of your life, you're going to find that can come at you. We've had a little bit of that come at us. We've had really supportive people, but then there are people who just kind of, they sit back and they look at you, and again, body language speaks a lot, kind of nod their head like, well, good for you. Go give it a try.
Remember that lady when we had our first public speaking engagement?
Yes.
And she's like, I'm not coming to your workshop because I didn't understand what it was about.
Yeah.
See, and I was like,
she came and told me that?
Why would she ever tell me that? Like, what was the end goal in that statement?
Exactly. So, actionably, what we can do is always consider the other person as having the best possible intentions. Now, how they put it out there, or how their body moves and their eyes and the brows furrow, is not necessarily an indication of what you may think is the issue. So clarifying things is a really wonderful way to bring relationships closer, to connect. I remember when Jenna said, I don't know what to say to you. I didn't know what to say to you in that moment. The first thing I thought was, oh, she's not a person who can answer something really quick. She needs to process. So I'm working on making sure that I say, okay, you heard what I said, and now I'm going to kind of back off and wait until you come back. And she always comes back. That's the thing. She always comes back and she says, in that moment, this is what I was feeling. And so, to be honest with you, it can be hurtful to me. But when I let go of that and I said, wait, she's being authentic with me, then I'm going to receive it exactly the way she intends it, which is for both our good. We have a wonderful mentor, and he responds all the time with everything that you do, whatever it is that you're a part of. If you're thinking about the other person in the conversation, and you're thinking, what are their needs? What are their expectations? Then you have this wonderful synergy of being able to share what you know or your passion within the scope of what their needs are. Well, it took me a long time to understand how that worked. But I think that coming into this very new digital kind of in video world, I'm beginning to understand that it's really important for us to not shy away, but to say, tell me what that looked like. What did I look like to you when that was happening? So the conversation can continue without it being like, stay, hands off, get away from, she's just this person,
Well, I think it also is there's a willingness to have the tough conversations.
Yeah.
I think we often shy away from the tough conversations because it can get messy, it can be emotional, it can erupt into other things, and you really have to go into it with a heart of really just listening and really being able to be able to look at the other side of the coin, really. And that's one of the things that I've always tried to do in my life, is to be able to see both sides of the coin. How is this going to affect whatever side that I'm looking at, and really just kind of see how that's going to move us forward and really be able to understand each other better, because sometimes you don't always get that.
No, I think what we're trying to say in summary is everyone's got to make small shifts. Not only the person who may have that RBF face, along with the individual who is coming at them with that question. It takes two people to make a change in conversation, perceptions, that kind of thing. So we want you to be encouraged to say, don't give up if somebody misunderstands you. Try to understand what they're seeing, where they're coming from, and help them understand that they could reframe the question that wouldn't make you feel in a particular way. It's hard. It's never an easy road, but it's so worth the journey of having a friendship that is authentic and real. And as you keep moving in the direction of your passion, people are just they're gonna be like fireflies, just buzzing around you. And that's what we're really hoping for you, is that your life is gonna start to build this fire. It's really going to become this thing that signals people to, wow, if she can do it, I can do it. And not to really take the time to make too many judgments on people.
Right. And judging is where you get in trouble. So what do you think the tipping point is, between a passionate expression of something and really displaying the actual confrontational attitude?
Well, there again, that's a great question. I have a problem with my way to express. So this is what I want to tell you. When you are passionate, the difference between, a passionate individual is that they have within them a sense of urgency and a sense of, depending on what the passion is, a sense of wanting to do it really well. And so that's what kind of comes across sometimes as having an attitude. And remind me, so it's the tipping point between, what did you say?
A confrontational attitude, or, passionately expressing yourself.
Well, confrontational to me is you come into somebody's face and you're ready to say, you have to do this, or this is what you're doing.
Right, but sometimes when people come into conversation and they're passionately talking about something, they come off as confrontational.
Again, that's the issue that we want to address, and is that when you start to immediately assume that somebody is confrontational. Now, I know that what happens to us as human beings is, well, we go, well, I know that person. That's how they talk when they're like that. Well, why are they talking that way? May have something that's completely out of your scope of understanding. And so confrontation can be positive, I think, but it can also be negative.
Well, I also think too, with that, where is the grace for growth? So they might have always spoken that way, but maybe they went home and self-educated, as a lot of most successful people in this world today do. They don't go home and watch TV. They go home and self-educate to grow themselves and to know themselves and to do better. And so maybe somebody, went home and did that and found this newfound confidence in themselves, right?
Yeah.
And then the next thing you know, they're in a team meeting and they feel passionate, but now they have the confidence to actually stand up and say what they really want to say and what they feel about the project, or, voice their opinions.
Yeah.
And then the next thing you know, oh, hey, we're misunderstood because, you have a confrontational attitude, when really you just found your light. You found your confidence.
I think it requires all of us to give ourselves that space that says, and I know it's hard because we're human beings with flaws. We all have them. But it takes that sometimes it's just a split second, and other times it's maybe a 10-second pause that says, wow, why are they seeing me that way? And I don't mind myself personally having to make adjustments if what they're saying to me is really true. Mm-hmm. When someone wants to confront you just because they don't like you, that's a different kind of confrontation that I find is negative. But when someone confronts you with, sometimes we laugh a lot around here because our generational gap sometimes just causes us to, come full circle. And Jenna might say to me, well, Fran, that might have happened in your day. And I stop and I have to think, what is she saying there? Am I wrong? See that face I make? Like, am I thinking hard? But what she's doing is she's giving me valuable information to say, you know what? There's a different way for you to think about that. And that I appreciate from that type of, good, well, we call it constructive criticism, or, being misunderstood comes sometimes, and you have to have that constructive criticism.
Yeah.
And it's how you grow.
It is. And I think that the tipping point, again, going back to that, the confrontational attitude often lies in the perception of the observer. And then what I really find interesting with the whole thing is that the person that was misunderstood is often the one that has to make the adjustment to suit others, instead of the person who perceived you incorrectly making the adjustment. And that just kind of blows my mind. It's like, so then it's almost like the world telling you, oh, you should be this way and you should be that way. And then we wonder why we have a whole bunch of people that are like, feel like they're put in a box.
Right.
Because now it's causing what we call an after effect of that, which is the chameleon. Yeah. So you get labeled all these things, you're controlling, you're passionate, whatever. And so then you're like, no, I'm going to make this adjustment so that I can fit in to whatever situation I'm in.
Right? Change my colors. I'm going to tell you honestly that when I first started doing this podcast, I had a brother who listened to a couple of the episodes, and he said to me, when you and I just talk, you're just being Fran and you're just talking. He said, but when I watched the first few episodes that you did, what happened was I saw you put on a role. Mm. And that really surprised me. And so I asked him to explain a little further, which he did. And I gave him full permission because I was ready for it. I wanted to do better. And I had to give a lot of thought to what he was saying, but he wasn't wrong. And so those moments when I was young, I definitely did exactly what he was saying I was doing in the early days of this ministry, was putting on a role or changing my color to meet whatever the need I felt was needed. Not that someone said it to me.
Well, it's kind of like that friend. We all have a friend, right? That when they hang out with a certain person, they act a certain way. But when they hang out with a different person, they act a different way.
Yeah.
That's very similar to a chameleon, because you're changing your colors for the environment that you're in. And I think we all even do it every day subconsciously, and we don't even realize it. When you're at home, you're one person, and when you're at work, you're a total different person, and when you're at your mother-in-law's house, you're a totally other different person, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's many of us are chameleons, but what we're talking about in the chameleon effect is really the extremes.
Yes,
because
exactly.
These are the people who really kind of take that on as an identity. And so they're like, okay, well, they said that I'm not pretty, so I'm going to, take on this identity and I'm not pretty. And so then it's, well, I'm just going to be sluggish, and I'm going to hang out with these people that are, maybe have no drive in life and no self-esteem because they make me feel better, or that sort of thing. And so it just becomes this cycle, because trying to get out of that, it's like you're in a hole trying to climb up with no rungs. And I wouldn't want to live like that.
I think that many of us unknowingly operate sometimes in what we might refer to as sort of a survival mode.
Yes.
If you're honest with yourself, and you go back and you look at, all the varying factors of your life, your upbringing, whether you're religious or non-religious, what your teacher said to you, how you thought people perceived you, we start then to adjust. But what we're talking about is finding a way to adjust for the other, making sure that you're not just saying, oh, it's always got to be me, because then you're not authentic.
Right.
But what you can do is begin to say, I want to know why you perceive me this way. And you can go back into yourself and say, I wonder why I do that. Oh, I know why I do that. It's the journey that both of us have sort of been on, of being more or less, working at what makes us who we are today. What can impact us in the future. And we're here because we know that if we can fan the flame of your life in a positive direction, hearing us talk about how people can sometimes refer to you in a not so good way, that there's this absolute way in which you can do immense things. Some of you, I don't know if you were born when Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister of England.
I have no idea.
Well, Margaret Thatcher became, I think, the first woman in England to have what we would call the presidency or the Prime Minister. And she had her characteristics were really kind of, you would say she was strong-willed and maybe even assertive in her way. And so people started labeling her the Iron Woman. But she just had a passionate desire to run the country in a way that was going to bring everyone into the same sort of united purpose. And so she had to overcome that label of being the Iron. And I actually believe, if I'm not mistaken, from what I've read about her, is she finally sort of owned that title. Okay, well, if that's how you see me, then that's a positive, because I'm strong-willed enough to get you what you need in this country. And see, she was focused on what the others needed. And so maybe we need to sometimes embrace that we are different and that we have people who might not understand us. That's okay.
It is okay. And really, when you do own that identity, understand that it doesn't define you.
Thank you, Jenna. That's
because
true.
so many people take that identity on and they're like, oh, well, this is going to define the rest of my life. I mean, could you imagine being the Iron Lady the rest of your life? I mean, she probably got called that to her face. Don't get me wrong. But if she allowed that to define her life for the rest of it after she was the prime minister, I think she would have easily been put into a chameleon survival mode at that point, because it's almost like you want to have such an impact that you start to feel like you are beating your head against the wall of like, why don't these people understand me? And so when you get that confidence again and you bring it back out, then they're just like, wow, she's really just intense. And it's like, no, she's just confident. And what I find interesting too is that you don't hear a lot of stories of it being the other way with men. It's always with women. And why is it that women always get this label of, oh, well, you know, here I finally stood up for myself, and then they're kind of like, whoa, and they think it is a left field thing. But if a man was to do the same thing,
they'd be cheering.
Oh, 100%.
You know, like, look at that man, he has confidence. And so it's all very interesting, our how we view life. I really like that you use the word, it's about confidence, because really that's what Margaret Thatcher had, was a real confidence in her ability. I watched a TV program about her once, and you know, like all women, she was the prime minister of England, and she would go home and she'd fix her husband dinner. You know, or she'd have the Secretary of State or whatever their titles were there.
Yeah, they're still real people.
And she'd say, come on over, and she'd cook them a home-cooked meal. And so, you know, people have all kinds of different facets of their life. And we want to encourage you to stick with it, because the rewards to understanding how to be a person of communication is worth it, is so worth it.
It really is. Well, that's all we have. Thank you so much for tuning in. Our next episode is communication hazards, how to avoid the pitfalls. Be sure to check out our Sparks of Wisdom that drop every Tuesday and Thursday. Subscribe and share our podcast. We're on all major platforms. Connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and as always, our website, sparklightministry.com. Now go out and set the world on fire.